Fabulous. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the Cut Carbon, Cut Costs webinar on what is the role of sustainability on winning tenders and new business. In today's session, it's going to go through the benefits of a net zero motivated workforce, how to engage staff in sustainability and energy efficiency, how to create an effective environmental policy, and how to use an environmental policy and green credentials to win new business and tenders. This webinar is hosted by Skills for Growth SME Support, working in collaboration with Rebecca Bocock and Carl Hurst from the Resource Efficiency and Net Zero team. Can we just flick on to the next slide, please, Carl? Okay, so today's session is the third of a four-part series taking place each Wednesday at 11 a.m. The previous sessions, if you were not on the live workshops, are all available on YouTube, which we can send out the links following this workshop itself. So just before we jump on to the Cut Carbon, Cut Costs workshops, I'm just going to quickly give you an overview of the Skills for Growth SME Support Programme. For those of you that are not currently on programme and would like to know a bit more about the skill support that we can offer. Next slide, please, Carl. Just one back, if we can. Fabulous. So the skills support, tongue-tied then. The Skills for Growth SME Support Programme. It's a programme designed to address skills gaps and give businesses the skills that they need to achieve productivity and growth within their organisations. How we do that, we understand and assess what gaps you have in the organisation. We work with your individual employees to do a training needs analysis with each of them, understand what skills, what do they currently do in their job, and what skills they're going to be and make them more effective and productive in their job. What we do then is we research and broker training and skills development on behalf of your business employees, where we can try and find fully funded, part funded and commercial training options to meet your skill needs in your organisation. Next slide, please, Carl. Some of those fully funded skills that are currently available to businesses are around project management, digital skills, which include the likes of digital marketing, cybersecurity, project management within digital space, Power BI, data analytics, those type of areas. There's also courses around leadership, whether that's a first-time line manager or team leader, supervisor, right going up to operational and senior management level. There's also sector-specific fully funded courses in manufacturing, health and social care, early years and construction. And there's also access to another 400 fully funded courses through the programme. Next slide, please, Carl. If you do want to find out how to access the programme, if you're not currently already on it, you can go to skillsforgrowthsme.co.uk and fill in the inquiries page on there. You can follow us on LinkedIn, or you can respond to us after this meeting with when we send through the links to the previous workshops and the recording and the slides from this one as well. So now I'm going to pass it over to Carl and Rebecca, who are going to go through today's Cut Carbon, Cut Costs session. Thank you. Just before I do pass you on, sorry, Carl. Please post questions in the chat. I'll be picking up the chat as Carl and Rebecca go through their presentations. There might be points where Carl and Rebecca stop, and we can ask, revisit the questions that you may have. There'll also be time at the end where we can ask questions and directly go through with them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third webinar of 4 in the Cut Carbon, Cut Cost series. The series is a whistle-stop introduction to some of the themes associated with environmental sustainability and energy efficiency. This third session will help you with some ideas on how to engage your workforce in sustainability and show you how to develop an environmental policy and use it and your other green credentials to benefit the business in winning tenders and new business. This presentation will take around 40 minutes with about 10 minutes at the end to discuss any thoughts or questions. If you have any questions, as Tom said, please put them in the chat as we go along. We will have time at the end for you to ask anything in person. I'll be asking you to unmute a couple of times and to shout out your ideas. And Bex also has a poll for you. If you could join in, we'd really appreciate your contributions. As Tom said in his introduction, presenting this morning are Bex Bocock and myself, Carl Hurst. We're both sustainability and net zero advisors with the Business Growth Hub. I'm going to be covering the benefits of having a net zero motivated workforce and how to engage staff in sustainability and energy efficiency. And Bex will cover creating an effective environmental policy and how to use it and your other green credentials to win tenders and new business. First, I'll start by introducing what we do in the sustainability and net zero team. Our sustainability and net zero service helps businesses to minimise inefficiencies within their operations and quantify and reduce their carbon emissions. We offer on-site resource efficiency reviews and one-to-one support to help identify opportunities and quantify cost and carbon savings. We also help businesses to calculate their carbon footprint and develop an action plan to improve. We can help you to build a business case for investment in low carbon technologies and help you to develop an environmental strategy. We can support you to implement projects, find local suppliers of green technologies and access funding. We also run a programme of webinars similar to this series called Journey to Net Zero. It's a bit longer and goes into more depth and is for businesses that would like to improve sustainability but don't know where to start. And there's a link to our services in the slide pack. So what are the benefits of having a net zero motivated workforce? The benefits of having a workforce that is motivated by sustainability. Our staff feel more involved in the business. They contribute ideas and are positive about change. This leads to some quick and easy wins, which reinforces that motivation and leads to further improvement ideas. This motivation and positivity can help with managing change and developing new ideas in other areas of your business. Engaging with your staff can bring its own rewards. Energy savings from the positive implementation of efficiency improvements and staff ideas can easily lead to cost and carbon savings of over 10% for very little outlay, as we saw in last week's webinar. But remember to continually reinforce sustainability and net zero message to embed the culture change within your business. Now, I'd like to get you all involved now. If you could unmute and shout out your ideas for what areas you think staff can realistically influence. Think about the energy use and the waste in your businesses. You all a bit shy?
Commuting.
Yep, commuting.
Recycling and I guess energy use in the home and or office.
Yep.
One in the chat there. We're about switching machines off, recycling as well.
Great. Okay, thanks for those contributions. These are the ones we came up with. These are sort of simple ideas, most of which you came up with then. They're similar to sort of government adverts to try and save energy in the home. So switching equipment off, for example, lighting, heating, cooling, IT equipment, not overriding the controls, for example, on thermostats. You turn the thermostat down by 1 degree, it saves 8% of your energy costs. And don't bring in your own heaters or fans. Oil-filled radiators are often left switched on overnight or all weekend, as you can't hear them. Last one to leave, first one in procedures or checklists for switching equipment on and off, and not over-ordering materials that can't be used. Use recycling bins correctly. If you put the mixed-use bin furthest away, it greatly increases the amount of recycling in the blue paper bin or the bottle bin. Business travel and commuting, as someone mentioned as well. Can staff work from home some days or do the meetings online? Looking now at people or technology solutions. People-focused solutions can be low cost, but ongoing support and reinforcement are needed to maintain savings. For example, you put a switch off notice over a light switch. After a couple of weeks, people don't even see the sign. Low carbon technology solutions have an upfront capital cost, but then provide reliable savings. So by installing controls, for example, or passive infrared or light sensors, timers and thermostats, you can really make quite substantial savings for very little cost. Usually, combined solutions are needed to maximise any benefits, train the staff to use the technology properly, and monitor usage and savings. You could also use incentives to help you in maintaining those savings. Leadership support is vital to the success of carbon and cost reduction projects. If staff see that owners and managers are committed, then it is much more likely that they will be engaged in the process too. Your success in cutting carbon and costs will ultimately benefit everyone in the business. So it's important that business leaders care about the company's carbon footprint and show that commitment consistently. You may have to sell the benefits to management, so it's important to put it in language that they understand. For example, comply with environmental legislation and reduce your business risk. Reducing energy costs improves profitability. And demonstrating environmental commitment gives us a marketing edge and helps us retain and win new business. Not only that, but additional benefits such as improved product quality, reduction in rejects, increased operational efficiency and reduced downtime. These are some of the things that can influence owners and managers to support you in cutting carbon and costs. It's important to understand the culture of your workforce, as the culture determines behaviour. If your staff tend to keep their heads down and only focus on their own tasks, they may not realise the wider impacts that they could have. Most people like to fit in and don't like change, so try to identify your key influencers. Who do your staff look up to? Also consider the influence of your customers. What do they want to see from you? What do they put in their tender documents? Find out who's interested in climate change and environmental issues. Do you have any staff with a personal interest in the environment? Who are the leaders among your workforce, and who are the ones most likely to be resistant to change? Again, understanding motivations and personalities helps. Utilize the key influencers within a business to bring other staff along and continue to show environmental leadership from the top of the business. There is a difference between awareness of an issue and changing your behaviour to address the issue. Just being aware of an issue like climate change rarely leads to a change in behaviour. There's usually another motivating factor behind the behaviour change. And finding those motivational factors is the key to changing behaviour. Cost is one of the main motivations for change, but your staff aren't the ones paying the energy bills. So there's little incentive for them to change their behaviour, to reduce energy use in the workplace, for example. Everyone will have different motivations, so there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. As I just said, motivation is key to changing people's behaviour. And I'd like to start with asking you for your motivation ideas. Let's all think of some different motivations for employee behaviour change. Please, could you unmute and shout out your ideas again? Thanks. Anyone got any ideas?
Fulfillment of personal values.
Yep. Right, the financial director, what's his motivation? Okay, we'll move on. I'll show you what the ideas that we came up with are. Different people are motivated by different things. For example, finance managers would be motivated by profitability or saving money. So use profits and payback to promote carbon saving projects to them. Sales staff will be motivated by incentives, making their jobs easier. Green credentials and improved business reputation can make it much easier to sell to customers, to retain and win new business. Other staff want to work for companies that are sustainable. Many people care about the environment, and it's a way of retaining and gaining new staff. In a recent poll, over 50% of people in the job market wanted to work for sustainable organisations. Now, going to look at a local case study. Some of you may know Clean Air Limited. They're a manufacturer based in Bolton. They make, test and install fume cupboards for laboratories. In 2019, they set up an environmental committee, and they have a plan to become net zero by the end of this year. This has worked well because the director has a personal interest in the net zero agenda and has taken the lead on making improvements at their site, such as LED lighting and solar panels. So they have that senior management support that's essential for success. There are 7 members of the team, including the director, the operations director, the marketing manager, design manager, and representatives from accounts, the shop floor, and purchasing. They meet every 3 months and categorise actions into energy, vehicles, packaging, waste, supply chain, and products. And they use KPIs to get everyone on board. As an example of their success, they improve fuel efficiency by monitoring the performance of their van drivers and giving out a prize at the Christmas party for the most efficient driver. As a result, the fuel efficiency of their vans has increased from around 25 miles per gallon to the mid to high 30s. So next, we're going to look at different types of motivation. Carrot and stick motivation is a motivational approach that involves offering a carrot or a reward for good behaviour and a stick, which is a negative consequence for poor behaviour. Businesses are rewarded financially by reducing carbon and costs. By having a carbon reduction plan, they can participate in tenders and win new business. Or they would be penalised by not complying with environmental laws or not being allowed to tender if they haven't got a carbon reduction plan. Looking at personal versus ethical motivations. Personal motivation is a benefit to the individual. In this case, donation to their chosen charity. And ethical motivation is a benefit to others. Here, helping sea life by reducing plastic waste. Corporate image is a big motivation for business. That's why many larger businesses spend a lot of money promoting their corporate image. Corporate image motivation. For example, in a green company, staff are proud and happy working for a company which protects the environment. Externally, customers choose us as a supplier because we're a green business. As I said, many tenders now require potential suppliers to have carbon reduction plans, and Bex will go over this again shortly. Let's look at settlers, prospectors, and pioneers. Different people will have different values, incentives, and goals. You may be able to identify some members of your staff as either settlers, prospectors, or pioneers. Settlers are motivated by safety, security, and the need to belong. These are the people who may be resistant to change, but they also don't like to be left out. They like to go along with the majority. Prospectors are motivated by success, self-esteem, and being held in the esteem of others. These are the people who enjoy competitions and strive to be the best. Pioneers are motivated by ethics, ideas, exploring and innovating. Pioneers are likely to be the first to sign up to a new scheme. They aren't afraid of change, and they're happy to come up with new ideas for improvements. Here are some ideas for motivating those different types of staff. The settlers, they want to belong. Everyone else is part of the green team. You should join in as well. The prospectors, they want to be seen as successful. So we'll announce the successes each month. The person who's made the best improvement wins a prize. And for pioneers, we want your ideas on how to make a difference and help the business to stand out from the crowd. What are the common challenges to engaging staff in sustainability projects? The lack of awareness that there is an issue. Whose responsibility is it, mine or someone else's? And do I have permission? Am I allowed to do something about it? Staff think of unintended consequences, such as will the cleaner be working in the dark if lighting controls are put in? There can be inconvenience of adding extra work or time to ensure that equipment and lights are turned off. And old habits die hard. This is the way we've always done things. So to answer these challenges, you need clear communication, an understanding of what constrains or motivates staff to operate differently. You need to provide staff with support and leadership. And consider proportionality. How important is it? Is it valuable to the business? And give it some suitable focus. Understand that different incentives work for different people and try taking small steps. Don't try to do everything at once. Communicate changes to your business by framing the change you want. Make it appropriate to your company and appropriate to the size and scale of the project or change. Get staff buy-in, consult with your workforce rather than giving orders, and listen to any concerns. Explain the reasons behind the change and the benefits to staff and the business. Think about how do you communicate that change and how effective is it? Should you consider a different way of communicating? Now, some ideas to get you started are get suggestions, for example, with a staff survey or quiz. Gather a team and appoint cut carbon, cut cost champions. Start meeting as a team and identify the key issues. Prioritize those issues and those actions that are needed, and decide what actions need to be taken and when. Think about measuring success. The timescale for impacts depends on the measures proposed. Visible signs can indicate early effectiveness and future slippage. For example, are the lights still being switched on or off at the right times? Regular monitoring and feedback to teams is essential, and the long-term performance impact should be reported and shared. Continue to look for opportunities to add ideas and suggestions. Some companies find rewards useful as suggestion schemes. And be realistic about what you can control and what you can't, about what you can influence and what you can't influence. Now looking at how to maintain your workforce's enthusiasm for sustainability and the environment. Cutting carbon and costs in a business can be a long-term activity, so consistent attention and commitment from business leaders is essential. Resources must be seen as valuable, so provide staff with the time and resources needed and you will be rewarded. Identify the key points where intervention will be useful, such as changing business activities and processes to include sustainability. Reporting procedures should include the business commitment and report any successes. And for new starts and job changes, training on sustainability should be included in their induction training. Reinforce the benefits with regular feedback and be quick to respond to change. You could also consider writing environmental responsibilities into job descriptions. This can be specific to the job role or general statements to the business values, which include environmental considerations. That concludes my part of the session. Has anyone got any questions on what we've covered so far? If not, I'll now hand you over to Bex to talk about using your green credentials to benefit your business.
Thank you, Carl. So in this part of the workshop, I specifically wanted to look at the role that your environmental credentials have in retaining contracts, winning new work, but also complying with legislation. In the back end of this part of the workshop, I will set out the importance of having an environmental policy and hopefully give you the tools to develop or improve the environmental policy that you have within your business. So, as I said, we're going to start by looking at retaining contracts, winning new work, and complying with legislation, and how your internal environmental credentials play a key part across these three themes. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to draw on a couple of examples that we've both seen within the media, but also through policy and also through conversations we've had with clients at the Business Growth Hub. So in terms of retaining existing contracts, this might be in the form of pressure from clients to have a particular accreditation. That could be something like ISO 14001, to procure or have a particular energy contract, or maybe material specifications in order to retain those existing contracts. So an example of this is Porsche have recently told their 1,300 suppliers that they must use renewable energy to manufacture their vehicle components if they want to continue doing business with the company. Another is a conversation actually that I had with a client, and they was a client of a well-known building merchant. And they put pressure on their suppliers to ensure that they have conducted an environmental product declaration of the products if they want to continue supplying. For a bit of context around what an environmental product declaration is, this is understanding the environmental impact value of the products that they're supplying. Another thing is your environmental credentials may actually be intrinsic in winning new work and bidding for big contracts. An example of this might be the government procurement policy note. So this is for government contracts that are worth more than £5 million, and suppliers must submit their current carbon footprint, carbon reduction plans, as Carl was mentioning earlier, and also committing to net zero. This carbon footprint must include all Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, plus 5 categories of Scope 3 emissions. This includes your upstream transportation and distribution, any waste that you generate within your organisation, your business travel, employee commuting, and then again your downstream transportation and distribution. So this this isn't something that only exists in government or public contracts, and I've actually had conversations with clients that seeing that this is dripping down into private contracts and also private biddings. This might not actually be applicable to your business at this point in time, but it is a good idea to get ahead of the game and start to think about your net zero plans. If you can be proactive and offer your customers your carbon footprint and reduction plan, it will also set you apart from the competition. In terms of regulation pressure or regulation drivers, an example is the new plastic packaging tax, but this came in April 2022. I wondered if anyone has actually been impacted by this plastic packaging tax, if we've got anyone in the room. No, it's usually worth asking because, you know, sometimes you do get someone in the room that has been impacted by this, and just to get their take on it. But just for a bit of background, as I said, on the 1st of April 2022, there was a new plastic packaging tax, and it was introduced and will affect tens of thousands of businesses. And importantly, it isn't only those that manufacture plastic packaging, but also those who import goods in plastic packaging as well. It's applicable to certain plastic packaging that contains less than 30% recycled plastic, and those that do contain less than 30% recycled plastic, they'll be taxed at a rate of £200 per tonne. If you've noticed on your shower bottles or different plastic bottles, you probably have noticed a bit of an uplift in on the packaging, it, you know, marketing it as they're doing a green thing and it'll highlight that it's got 30% recycled plastic in. Obviously, it's a good thing, but it's likely to be driven by this plastic packaging tax to have that minimum 30% recycled plastic. So keep an eye out. Yeah, maybe it's just because I'm really interested in this space, but I do find it interesting. So the idea of this is that the government hopes the measure will increase the use of recycled plastic in packaging by around 40%. And the types of packaging that will be affected include packaging used in the supply chain, such as plastic trays, crates and containers, shrink and pallet wrapping, protective film, labels, coat hangers and food wrappers, and also, sorry, excuse me, and also packaging designed for single use by the consumer. So this could include plastic bags, disposable cups, gift wrapping, and also those single use food pouches. So think, yeah, maybe baby wrappers. Another interesting one, actually, I think they've banned in Scotland now is, you know, when you get tomato ketchup in those small little plastic pouches. There are some types of plastic packaging excluded from the tax, and this includes packaging for long-term storage or for medical use. If you do manufacture or import more than 10 tonnes of plastic packaging per year, then you do need to register for this plastic packaging tax. We do have a link at the bottom of the slide there, which is information on some top tips around this plastic packaging tax. Another one I wanted to just introduce here in terms of the regulation pressure. We're seeing now that, and it might not actually be applicable to those in the room right now, but if you wanted to trade in France, they have put some further policy in place to say that you cannot put on a packaging that it is biodegradable if it cannot be composted at home. So at present in the UK, you'll often see on coffee cups and stuff that it does say that the packaging is biodegradable, but actually this is biodegradable at a commercial level. So under very high temperatures and high pressures, that is actually biodegradable. Now, that legislation hasn't trickled down into the UK, but it is starting to make waves in different European countries, so it is likely that these sort of policies will start to rear its head in England. I know Scotland have much more stringent sort of policy around single-use plastic. So what I wanted to look at next is an introduction into environmental policies. And this might be one of the green credentials that you think as a business could be your first step in, you know, building up that portfolio of your environmental credentials. So I just wanted to ask at this point, if we could just pull up that poll, please, Zoe, that'd be great. Where the people in the room are up to with their environmental policies and if they've been asked by any of their suppliers. So that should have come up now on your screen. So the question is, do you have an environmental policy? Yes, and we are happy with the content and the structure. Yes, but it could be improved. C is we don't have an environmental policy, but have been asked by stakeholders to provide one. Or the final answer is we don't have an environmental policy and we've never actually been asked to produce one. So I will answer D so that I can see the results here.
Do you want me to read out the results, Bex?
If you wouldn't mind, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have the majority, 46% are saying B, yes, but it could be improved. We've got some that are saying we don't have an environmental policy, but have been asked by stakeholders to provide one. We've got a couple in the room that don't have an environmental policy and never been asked for one. And there's 2 as well for question A, which is yes, we're happy with the current concept and structure. But yeah, the majority are B and C.
Brilliant. So yeah, hopefully, you know, the next couple of slides will give you a bit of a structure to look at what improvements you could make in your environmental policy. And obviously it's really interesting to see those that have answered that you've not actually got one in place at the minute and you are starting to be asked by your stakeholders. And then finally, you know, although you aren't being asked at the minute to produce an environmental policy, it is always, you know, important to anything in business to be being proactive around these things rather than being reactive and scrambling together when you've got yourself a contract or, you know, you're in the final stages of bidding for something and then you have to produce something like an environmental policy. And hopefully by the end of the session, you will be able to produce your own environmental policy. What should be included, what to put in your action plan, but also, you know, I'll reiterate this at the end, but feel free to send over your environmental policies to Tom and he will send them our way and we'll be happy to have a review of those to make sure that you've got everything within that environmental policy that we would expect to see. So without further ado, so writing your environmental policy is your way of making a statement of your intent for your business that formally communicates your intentions with regards to environmental issues and performance. So it does actually showcase that you have an understanding of your business's significant environmental impacts. So when we talk about impacts, these are your business's change to the environment, and this is the result of your organization's environmental aspects. So an aspect might be that your company consumes energy, and the impact on that environment would be the emissions associated with creating that energy in the first place. So it also highlights where you have the highest carbon footprint and where you've started to take actions to mitigate. Your environmental policy will include your aspects and impacts. It will also have some consideration of your stakeholders, but also start to outline that you have a legal obligation for some of these things that are highlighted within your environmental policy. So as we've just found out then from the poll, you may need an environmental policy because it's a requirement from a customer, or you need one to sort of bid for a tender or a pre-qualification questionnaire. And if there is anyone in the room that does have ISO 14001, you will know that an environmental policy is a requirement to have the accreditation to that standard. But why should you have an environmental policy? So it gives your it gives you a better understanding of your company's environmental impacts. It gives you building blocks for meaningful, measurable environmental improvement, which are tailored to your business's size and type. And also, when we're thinking about having these building blocks for meaningful, measurable environmental impacts, it's really important to, you know, without having a baseline, how can you measure your improvement? Another thing is your environmental policy demonstrates to your staff that you're serious about environmental issues. And from your stakeholders' perspective, it communicates that you're serious about environmental issues and also performance. Yeah, so this is more commonly becoming more of a must-have than a nice-to-have. So who really cares whether you have an environmental policy? Have we got any ideas? Any ideas? Who we think cares if you've got an environmental policy? So we've discussed that maybe new business, existing contracts. Who else do we think?
Staff.
Yeah.
Internally.
Mm-hmm.
The
Definitely.
government.
Yeah. Yeah. These I'm going to come to them in a minute, but yeah, really good one, that one. So really, it's all your interested parties. Anyone who interacts with your company will be interested in your environmental policy. So here are a couple that I've just pulled out. So staff, like Tom said, Anthesis, which is a big consultancy, they found in a survey of over 1,000 UK workers, that sustainability, this was 53% of respondents said that sustainability was an important factor when choosing a company to work for. If you are, you know, you have a product that you sell to a customer, there was a survey by Deloitte, and they found that 28% of consumers claim to have stopped purchasing certain brands or products because they had ethical or sustainability related concerns about them. There is an investor into your business might be interested to know what's included in your environmental policy, and this is all around the rise of ESG. So you've probably heard that buzzword around, and basically investing without a consideration of the environmental, social, and governance is becoming increasingly less acceptable. Rightly so, I can't remember who said it, but local authorities will be really interested to see if you've got an environmental policy, because they want to see how the how is Manchester performing against its carbon neutral targets. A quite interesting one is that you might not think is local residents. So within your environmental policy, you will highlight what your impacts are to the environment and how you're managing those impacts. So, for example, residents might want to see issues associated with vibrations from transport, noise and light, these sorts of things, litter, maybe addressed in your environmental policy. And then just one more to pick out here is regulators. So within your environmental policy, you'll acknowledge, that you have compliance obligations, and it doesn't ensure compliancy with the legislation, but it just highlights that you've got this bit of understanding and awareness of your compliance obligations. So here are a few examples of how a good environmental policy can actually help your relationships with your staff, your regulators, and also your customers. So if we look at staff first, as we mentioned through those couple of surveys, morale and productivity, but also attracting and retaining staff. There's been some new surveys that have been done around this, attracting and retaining staff, and more commonly, especially as the younger generations are coming through now, through getting into age of coming into the workforce. These demographics are actually putting sustainability at a priority when they're looking at businesses to work for. So that's really important from that point of view. In terms of regulators, we're thinking about legal compliance, better relationships with your regulators, and also this could lead to fewer visits. And then in terms of customers, that decision-making factor or a requirement, for example, I want the products that I buy to have 100% recycled packaging, that sort of thing. And then again, those better relationships. So I'm going to run through here the components of what to expect in an environmental policy. I'm sure when the slides are sent around, or when you look back at this on YouTube, you'll be able to refer back to this slide and make sure you've got these key components of this environmental policy. So first up, we would just very plainly like to say that it is an environmental policy statement as clear as the three words are. A company logo and your branding, and then an introductory statement, which includes a brief paragraph introducing who the company is and what areas and who the policy covers. There should be an acknowledgement that the business impacts on the environment, but also the statements of environmental commitment. These statements of environmental commitment, you'll have 3 core statements that we would like to see across anyone's environmental policy, but then also some tailored statements, which we'll come to in a second. Within this, we'd also like to see a commitment to communicate. How will you communicate, who and where? And then similarly, a commitment to review this policy. Again, how are you going to review it, who and when? And then this should be signed by the most senior person in the company, dated, and then of course version controlled. So a couple of general comments on your environmental policy. It's really important that you are clear and you do use business-like language because it is a formal document. It's important to stick to your point and be concise. When we're looking at environmental policies, we don't really want to see, well, if you can be concise enough and use this as a guideline to keep it on one side of an A4 piece of paper, but also state your policy. In terms of what you want to avoid on this environmental policy is rambling or waffling. It's just, again, that's just to solidify being concise within this document, but also, although it is a formal document, it is a business document, do avoid the use of jargon and acronyms, because when we think back about who would be interested in your environmental policy, you have to think about all the stakeholders that might actually be reading this environmental policy. You should also, avoid going overboard. Make sure that your commitments are realistic, achievable, and that you can also evidence them. You don't give, and this is really quite important, that you don't give your specific targets within your policy. So think of, your policy is just an overview of your commitments, and any specific numerical or targets should be put in your action plan instead. Think of it like your environmental plan is your high-level summary, and it is your cover sheet for your environmental plans. And another bit at the bottom here is just don't name any staff, only job roles within your environmental policy. So, as I said earlier, there are 3 standard commitments which we'd expect to see in any business's environmental policy, and this is regardless of the size or the sector or the business activities. And these are that your company is committed to a protection of the environment, prevention of pollution, and also meeting and exceeding your compliance obligations. Now, when we talk about compliance obligations, we're talking about your legal compliance obligations, but also those compliance obligations that you set within yourself internally. So these might be any memberships that you signed up to, any trade agreements, those sort of things. In addition to these 3 commitments, businesses should add their own commitments which are specific and relevant to their business activities. So, for example, if we take a joinery business, you might expect there to be a commitment around using sustainably sourced timber. For a haulage company, you'd expect to see commitments on fuel efficiency measures and also fleet management. So just to reiterate that these, when we look at these tailored commitments, they should be suitable and appropriate to your business. They should be based on your company's environmental impacts, and tailored to the nature, scale and context of the organisation. So I'm just going to run through an example of those tailored policy commitments. So let's say that one of your business's significant aspects is the use of company vehicles. And here are some examples of what those commitments might look like in your environmental policy. This could be, we will encourage fuel efficient driver behaviours. We will reduce travel miles through better journey planning from our fleet. And we aim for all vehicles to be Euro 6 compliant. Another example of this, your example activity might be the use of electricity. And within your environmental policy commitment examples, you could say, we will encourage energy efficiency. We will have start up, shut down procedures, those sort of things. So the first thing to do is just to map out, what are your significant aspects? What are you doing within your business? And then from there, draw out those policy commitments. So only the last couple of slides now. So when should your policy be reviewed? So it really should be part of a cycle of continual improvement. And we believe that an environmental policy should be reviewed at least annually or when there has been substantial changes to the business. These changes could include moving site, adding different products or services, acquiring a new subsidiary. And really, you need to think about, there has been loads of changes in the past 2 or 3 years. For most of us, this could be employees, working in a more hybrid way. And how has this impacted your business? Has it reduced your office heating emissions, but also increased any business travel, or has it, decreased your commuting emissions? Having a look at how that has impacted your significant aspects. And then finally, when your environmental objectives have been achieved, so those objectives that sit within your environmental plan, how have they been achieved, and how does that impact then your environmental policy? So what should you do with your environmental policy? So really, your environmental policy should be available to anyone that asks. So think about your stakeholders again. How would they want to be able to get hold of your environmental policy? And here are a couple of examples that we've come up with. The first one, and the most obvious probably, is your website. It's really important though, if you are going to post it on your website, that you make sure that any old versions don't come up when you do a quick Google search. You could also have a copy in your reception area, your staff handbook, your intranet, but also implementing it into your staff awareness training. When we think about emphasising your environmental policy in your staff handbook or during the induction process, it can all help with staff engaging with this topic, just like the sort of things that Carl was talking about earlier. And really importantly, before I hand back to Tom, is that continue to revisit your environmental policy. Don't make this as a policy and then put it in your bottom drawer. It is a living, breathing document that will change, and your commitments will change as your business grows and changes, as those things that I've just pointed out earlier. But if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now, and we'll do our best to answer them. And also, as I said earlier, if you want to send over your environmental policy to us, we're more than happy to have a review of them and feedback any suggestions that we have.
Thanks very much, Bex. I posted my email in the chat if anyone would like to email their environmental policy, but we'll also be sending out these slides after this session today as well. Just to let you know about the next session up next Tuesday. This is the last one in the series, so if you're not already booked on, we will be sending out the link on how to join and register through Eventbrite, and how to join that session, which is how a sustainable marketing strategy can lead to a competitive advantage, which will be taking place next Tuesday at 11 o'clock. But if you haven't got any further questions, thank you very much for attending today. You will be receiving a recording, the slide deck, and obviously if you want any further information or would like to get in touch with either Rebecca or Carl, please feel free to state that in your email reply. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.